Hello and welcome to the AskAtticus podcast, where we dissect the issues of current affairs and politics and what they mean for business and broader society. My name is Leon Cook. I'm the co-founder of Atticus Partners, and I'm joined today by Peter Cardwell, Senior Advisor to Atticus. Morning, Peter.
Good morning.
Peter, when we spoke to each other at a conference in Birmingham, which is only a couple of weeks ago, I don't think either of us could potentially have imagined that things would unravel quite so quickly. What would you say to the events of the last 24, 48 hours? And did you ever think it could be like this?
It seems like a lifetime ago that we were talking at Conservative Party conference, Leon, and the events of the last 48 hours. I'm afraid it probably could have been predicted in terms of Liz Truss's demise. It didn't look at that stage when we spoke previously over a Conservative Party conference in Birmingham that she was in any way secure. She'd just done a massive U-turn on the 45p tax, and that really was the beginning of the end for her. And after 44 days, she's out. Mood and the focus, of course, now turns to who's next. And certainly even throughout the morning, as we sit here on Friday morning, the momentum for Boris Johnson and the possibility that he will get above 100 nominations, which he will need, as will other candidates, to get onto the ballot on Monday at 2 o'clock. It looks as if Boris Johnson's doing pretty well. He's coming back from a holiday in the Caribbean. Rishi Sunak and Penny Mordaunt will perhaps make it onto that ballot as well. I think Rishi Sunak definitely will. I think Penny Mordaunt, there's more of a question mark over that. But there is a battle royale for the soul of the Conservative Party, and Labour are, of course, rubbing their hands with glee.
I think people who've been watching politics or involved in it for the last 20, 30 years probably would never. We keep talking about unprecedented events, but this absolutely feels like it. The idea that we went away from conference with Liz not delivering the most barnstorming speech, but something that steadied the ship, and yet here we are just 2 weeks later. I think you've already identified there the three runners and riders for what may go to the membership in about a week's time. But if people were to imagine only 3 months ago or shorter that Boris might even beat Lord Melbourne's record of 155 days in 1834, he came back less than half a year later. Is that actually plausible? And do you think that is an election-winning strategy? Bearing in mind there is still a Privileges Committee investigation outstanding into him, but the membership he is still incredibly popular with. And I think that were it to be a Rishi Boris straight shoot for the title, he will probably win. Do you agree with that?
Yes, I do. It's interesting. And what is the element of this this leadership contest, I suppose, that hasn't been there before, is that there will be an indicative vote in terms of what the MPs think. So even when it gets down to the final two, if there are two candidates who make it over the 100, which I expect there to be, the MPs will vote again in an indicative vote to make clear to the membership who they think should be the next leader of the Conservative Party. But that is only a suggestion. And the membership of the Conservative Party, I think, will look very favourably on Boris Johnson. They'll be looking as to who can win, when they go on the doorsteps. And I know there have been a number of difficult times in various by-elections for people under Liz Truss, people being shouted at and all sorts of abuse and so on in regard to the Liz Truss period of office. Certainly that's just a factor of elections, but nonetheless, when Boris Johnson is on the ballot, he has proved to be a hugely successful electoral asset. And Rishi Sunak hasn't proved that, neither has Penny Mordaunt necessarily, and people may just want to go with what they know. 2019 will have been very, very difficult and different from 2024, when I think the election will come next. I don't think there'll be an election before then, although basically every opposition party is calling for one. But certainly Boris Johnson is some sort of electoral asset, and I think people may go with the devil they know.
I think that he is an electoral asset, or at least he used to be. I don't know whether his stardust has waned or come off a little bit as a result of all of the events of the last year. I mean, I saw a poll yesterday, whether this can actually believe, Labour at 53%, the Conservatives at 14%, which would be an electoral wipeout. And there must be at least 200 Conservative MPs looking at their majority, some of them
but desperate people do desperate things, Leon, and I think I agree with you in that the Conservative Party is in a really, really dire state. I think that the MPs will think that Rishi Sunak is the person to steady the markets. His partnership with Jeremy Hunt would be something which would be seen certainly as sensible. But I also think that the membership may look at Boris Johnson, and just there's something about Boris that he's pretty indestructible in the minds of the Conservative Party membership, who've already shown that they don't go with the conventional choice when they voted for Liz Truss.
If you were advising Labour High Command and said, well, our desired outcome here is X, what would you say? Would they prefer to face off against Boris, Rishi, or Penny?
Penny Mordaunt, I think, would be the candidate that they would fear least. I think Boris Johnson is probably the candidate they fear most. But Rishi Sunak and Boris Johnson do different things in terms of areas of the country. Boris Johnson, much more a sort of tax and spend kind of person. And I think in the red wall seats, he would clean up there. The problem would be the more blue wall seats, the ones where Rishi Sunak would be a candidate who would win greater votes and would certainly in the leafier suburbs, Rishi Sunak would be more popular. But the choice is a very, very stark one between Rishi Sunak and Boris Johnson, who I think will probably end up as the final two.
It should be interesting to see what is trending on Twitter today. I see that Jacob Rees-Mogg just 53 minutes ago has tweeted, "I'm backing Boris or bust." So you have, I think, 3 factions within the Conservative Party that I can see.
At least.
At least. So the old guard that were with him before, who will back him again, Nadine Dorries, I'd imagine she'll tweet about 12 times today at least. There are those that always wanted Sunak and will say, "We told you so." And then there are others who think, well, maybe we need a unity candidate. But I think it's Ben Wallace has made pretty clear he's not going to come forward. Does it matter whoever it is? Is there any outcome other than a Labour win in 2024 or 5? Turkeys don't vote for Christmas. I don't buy any of this. We want an election. Why would the Conservatives give them one? There isn't a mechanism for it. What is the best possible outcome for the Conservatives from here, do you think?
A week is a long time in politics. 2 years is a lifetime. 5 months ago, Boris Johnson was talking about a third term. He may well now get that if the momentum continues for him. In terms of a Conservative electoral victory in 2024, I think it's highly, highly unlikely. But at the same time, there could be a Labour majority, there could be a hung parliament. We just don't know. It's too far away to tell. There's so much that changes so quickly in British politics. And what the polls show as well, probably quite rightly, the British public are fickle. We are much less tribal as a nation than we were. People respond emotionally to politicians, and there's no politician they respond more emotionally to than Boris Johnson. If you had Rishi Sunak against Keir Starmer, I think you're in a very, very different contest than Boris Johnson versus Keir Starmer. I think there are many different factors to that, some better, some worse for the Conservative Party, whether it's economic competence you want to go for with Rishi Sunak, or the more stardust of Boris, a proven electoral asset. So it's a big, big decision for the Conservative Party to make, and they're going to make it very, very soon as well. This is such a short contest, and a huge amount is going to happen in the coming days.
We touched on it very briefly in Birmingham when we spoke last, but do you think that this has, again, a knock-on effect for the part of the world or where you're from, or Scotland, where in the event that the Conservatives decide, MPs due to preserve their pensions for another couple of years, that it allows Nicola Sturgeon to say, look, we told you so, it's absolutely time for an independence referendum, and that destabilizes things in Northern Ireland? Is there a knock-on effect to this?
Yes, absolutely. I think that Boris Johnson is obviously very much in favour of the Northern Ireland Protocol bill. But in terms of Scotland, it's probably more interesting, because Labour need to win and do well in Scotland if they are to become a majority government. And Boris Johnson is toxic north of the border. Rishi Sunak isn't to the same extent. There's still no great love for him, but Boris Johnson is really toxic in Scotland. And I think the SNP would very much welcome him, because they would have a lot to rail against and hold him up as a sort of poster boy for a second Scottish referendum. And I think they're not going to stop at anything anyway. They're just going to keep going until they get one. Boris Johnson won't grant them one, but he is a good bogeyman for them electorally. And I think if Scotland gets independence, I think Northern Ireland may well be next. That is a real worry for many unionists like me.
Just taking into account your comments earlier, just a moment ago, in terms of the stature of the 3 candidates, I'll give you a different view, in that those who back Boris will never countenance Rishi because they think he stabbed him in the back, and those that back Rishi will couldn't contemplate the idea of Boris coming back. And as a result of that, that Penny is actually the only one who speaks human, isn't under an investigation, isn't super wealthy, will you be happy to go down the pub and have a pint with, and speaks to traditional Conservative values. And I have to say, every time I see her at the dispatch box, she is very much across her brief. So I think she may have too far to travel in terms of getting support from those Conservative colleagues of hers, but I think there is definitely a school of thought that says we need something different. I don't know if that will actually play out that way, but that's my view.
I think there's a lot in that. I think she did very well at the dispatch box the other day when she was put up to defend Liz Truss. She's popular. She's someone who does have a lot of support. She's certainly seen as the future of the Conservative Party. I think a lot of her supporters would go to Boris Johnson if she were knocked out of the contest. I think it's very bitter, as you correctly say, between Rishi Sunak and Boris Johnson, and Penny Mordaunt is the only one of the three of them. One thing you missed out is that she hasn't got a fixed penalty notice for breaking lockdown as well, which may be a factor in this as well. But certainly I think she's got a bright future. I think she'll be a senior member of the government. I can't quite see her as Prime Minister, but let's talk in a week, see where we are.
Absolutely. Well, the cabinet may be looking over their shoulder to wonder whether they're still going to be in post in a week or 12 days time. So Wikipedia editors, get ready, because you might be sharpening your pencils. Last question, cards on the table. If you were a betting man, Peter, what is going to happen?
I think Rishi Sunak is going to be the next Prime Minister of this country, but I think it's going to be a really, really tough fight. And I think it's going to be very, very brutal. And I think that the unity the Conservative Party needs is not going to happen either in the short term or in 2024. I think it's going to be a really, really tough thing for whoever is Prime Minister. And I think Labour are probably going to be a majority after 2024.
There you go, folks. You heard it here first. Peter Cardwell and myself, Leon Cook. Thank you very much for listening in. This was the Ask Atticus podcast. Thanks for your attention. Thanks, Peter.
Thanks.